Hey guys, Mustached Tom here to review the movie Blink Twice. Now, I've seen the trailer for this a few times, but I was a little late on it due to a lot of Let's Play, catch-up, and all that stuff. So, I'm getting back into movies as concisely as I can conceivably do. So, finally got to check it out, and here's my review, as objective as conceivably possible. So, we begin the movie with our lady texter by the name of Frida. And she has this admiration, we'll say, for Slater King. She works under him currently as a lower consultant. I'm not exactly sure what her position is meant to be. That part isn't really too clear. But we do see that Slater, cutting to him, apologizes in a video for some vague reason or whatever. So, Frida believes that she needs a little vacation from all the work, as she also works for this company that he, essentially owns, King Tech, and they're having a little bit of a gala. And she is told to appear more invisible, as in, try not to make too much of an impression, due to, I'm not sure if it's I'm not sure, if this movie is meant to be set in an older time, or if he's suggesting that she can't move up in the world due to, her race or being a female. I'm not sure if it's both. But nonetheless, she meets up with her coworker slash friend named Jess. And they have a little bit of a hangout. And they join the foundational meeting. She goes on talking about how success is the best revenge, which is one of the earliest lines in the movie. And seeing how the movie ends, now I can see the setup and payoff of that line, as I did initially think that the ending was a little bit off, but thinking back to that line, I think it falls in place, but we'll get to that. Anywho, she slips and falls with her, I guess, glass slipper, or see it little, the heel of the shoes, or at any rate, Slater picks her up. She suggests she then meets his psychiatrist and sort of haphazardly jokes, "Blink twice if you're in danger," which he does so, but he's trying to offplay it. So, he's about to leave, Slater is, and then suddenly comes back and invites the both of them to his own island that he's bought. They arrive, and we got a little montage of them, the two hanging out, getting close, and getting that invitation, as I mentioned. And in the process of arriving on the island, their phones are asked for. No phones on the island. However, they still have a photographer, so their photo is taken. And the title card blinks in very briefly. She puffs herself with this, I think the brand was called Desaderia, which is apparently extremely vital to the plot. I didn't know that that was the thing, that it was the sort of linchpin of which things begin to shift around the environment, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Because she sees that the lipstick, for example, is already used, so she throws that out. She meets this older woman that works there, and pointing at her, Frida, and calling her, referring to a red rabbit, which she's very confused by initially, and we'll get to why that is later as well. And then leaves. So, they are all given very similar dresses and offered to the pool for a little substance and drink, which I thought was also part of, the more, I guess that's actually, bizarrely, the red herring, I suppose. And he goes on about how forgetting is better than remembering, as a huge part of this story. So, they have a group dinner, and they get super high. And the next morning, or perceived morning, her stain that she obtained during that lunch vanishes. So she's not quite clear what happened. But the party persists shortly after via another montage, going to the sauna, and then having another lovely little diner. And we can see that her nails are getting really dirty. She designs them in particular, is a very notable feature too. So she begins smoking on her own, and, we have others meeting others, Rich and Cody, just some of the other guys that are making their presence known in the story in terms of how they're going about. So they dance with some music at night, and later on, Jess, separated from most of the group, gets bit by a snake abruptly. A venomous one. And of course, Frida sets her aside and asks what's wrong. With blood running down Jess' face and her nose, she begins to allude to something being off about this location. So, she decides to head off on her own, that being Frida, and gets into this weird building that she hadn't seen before or didn't recognize. She notices all these red bags. But she hears a noise and sees the older woman that works there. She offers her this drink, which is snake venom. And we also recall that Jess was already bitten by a snake, so that is just as a quick reminder. So the snake is ever present, and we begin to see flashbacks through Frida's perspective about the nights prior that we have been skipping out on. And Jess even saying, hide this, being a knife, at some point in one of the nights. And we then further see that the women are just out of energy. They are just absolutely not, they're out of their wits' end, as it were. And suddenly, Jess, who was there, who was set aside, is now gone. And furthermore, when Frida still knows about it and is asking the other ladies next to her, they all seem to not know what she's referring to, as if Jess almost never existed. cluing us in into one of the deviousnesses of said island, or, what is going on. And the knife recalled is dropped by her mirror specifically, Frida's. Sarah finds the lighter from Jess. She had a lighter that she brought with her, or she was the one that smoked the most anyway, so she had her own lighter anyway. So Sarah talks about during one of their little meet and lunch things that or one-on-one with Sarah about not really knowing any of these men either that brought them here. Thus, Frida puts together that they are erasing the lady's memories using this perfume, is what she concludes. The perfume she spritzed on herself fairly early on in the movie. But it would suggest that the snake venom that she was offered later on seems to have some, for whatever reason, a cure, at least for this memory thing going on. So the two of them, the two who now remember, being Frida and Sarah, who remember, offer the venom to the other two ladies that are still there. And of course it's going to take whatever amount of time. But they threw it through, trying to play it off like, oh, just drink and whatnot. The lads are off doing something else throughout this juncture of those two ploying to get the other two's memories back, by the way. But they are going to be coming back, as suggested by the fifth older woman that seems to be the most helping of this whole ordeal. So, they begin to see that the guys are arriving. Frida tries to go for the phones, but is unsuccessful in doing so. Even when having the phones out, they don't have any service anyway, so they kind of have to find another way to tear apart that. And Frida finally hears the warning that she suggested that Sarah use about smoking a blunt really loudly to suggest that someone was coming, that being Slade, who is now in the room looking around, always moving this red couch that he has in this area that she's currently in, but she gets out. We then get a flashback, our first of quite a few. Here we finally see that on the nights where they're, out of it, they were tied up, clearly taken advantage of at night. And with their memories all, not being where they ought to be. And it gets all the way down to, obviously, them being taken advantage of. Being held hostage, and then, this whole memory thing bringing them back to some semblance of being fine the next morning. So, during one of their later dinners, with Frida and Sarah now fully capable and ready, Frida suggests a dance. But it is a guise to begin moving objects to locations where they begin to, they're capable of reaching and fighting back against these assaulters. And the other two ladies at this night also now begin to remember due to the various venom drinks that they are offered here. Thus, they begin to immediately attack back after remembering what had been done to them. Unfortunately, the latter two who remembered don't quite make it out alive. In fact, one of them is shot in the head. Frida is chased after seeing this, but she is kept alive after making a sound and is grabbed. Sarah obviously trying to fight back in her own right for a time being as well, but obviously not to the best extent. And we also see that the other, Camellia, I believe her name is also choked dead to death in the building. And that the older woman, that she's totally on board with this whole thing about forgetting, and Sarah sees this, and she now has her weapon, and it's just the two of them at the moment, so she strikes back. So Sarah holds up her gun to the guy that took advantage of her and fires. Thus, the two of them, Sarah and Frida, meet up. It is, finally, within the pictures, among the pictures that were taken, that were hidden in the stash that she was trying to look for the phones earlier. She stored some of them in her dress. One of them comes loose, and she looks upon it, and it turns out that she was here before, on this island. And that is how powerful this forgiveness perfume is, I guess. So Slater goes on a wild tangent about how he can prove that there is no such thing as forgiveness, but forgetting would be a substantially better thing, as he repeatedly says he's sorry and then looks to her and says, well, do you forgive? Which, I mean, after everything, right? Unfortunately, Sarah also runs out of bullets and is also caught. However, during his monologue about wanting them to forget, he abruptly begins to forget, as she reveals that she put the perfume substance in his smoke, so he falls and is kept alive, interestingly enough. It's the two of them, being Frida and Sarah, remaining, and him, who's now forgotten everything that just occurred. And we cut to them back on the next quarterly meeting, I guess, in which I don't know how much time has passed, but now Frida is established as the new CEO, aka referring to what I said earlier about what her mom said to her, being success being the best revenge. So now she is running the place. Success, right? She runs it. And she has to her left this person who's completely forgotten all this stuff. So she's in full control, ostensibly. And that is the movie Blink Twice. So I will say, it's, the perfume stuff is a little bit like the stuff that's like, okay, it's a bit out there. You have to buy into that. That's just how that works. But outside of that, I would say this movie is definitely pretty interesting. And definitely engaging. There are definitely quite a few musical cues that are very abrupt. Like, it'll play music and then, like, insta snap shut. And, I think the aspect of that horror really falls in line when Frida from her perspective, begins to remember things. And now she is dealing with a circumstance where she and the only other individual later, approximately at the same time, Sarah being the only other person who remembers among the ladies, in this situation where they have to try to play off this idea that they remember everything. Because any suggestion, because among their memories, when Frida was hiding in that building the first time, we actually did get a flashback. I neglected to mention this. We see that Slater had killed Jess by snapping her neck, saying how the snake venom again cured her and that she couldn't forget anymore. I guess it's just like that's a permanent cure. I guess I'm not sure, but that's definitely where the tensions begin to rise in terms of our protagonist. And yeah, seeing that shift in dynamic during that party is definitely that cathartic moment in the horror movie, or the thriller in this case, of where we get to see them, the others remember, but unfortunately for the other two, there was some fighting back and they did not quite make it. But they did, in the process, kill the people that were taking advantage of them prior, so a little bit of tit for tat, as it were, a little bit of back and forth in terms of like who has leverage, who is calling the shots, who is what perspective are we following? Are we following the Frida prior who's forgotten all of this, or are we even more tense when we now know via the flashbacks, and now Thea's also recognizing that, how much more horror. It's interesting, it's like the reverse of that typical horror trope, right? You fear what you don't see. This is technically almost flipping that in a sense, because you don't see it initially, and everything seems fine, and then it's when you recall the thing from before, it's like, oh, now there's a horror element there. It's like, okay, that's an interesting flip on that perspective. So I really do appreciate that as a flipping device of that typical horror trope. So yeah, really great movie. I would recommend seeing it if you haven't already, and would give the score as an 8 or a 9 out of 10. I think this is a really good movie. So, that's my review of Blink Twice, and if you ended up enjoying my review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers, second to my PayPal, which can help support me and my channel directly, and third to my Discord server, where you can join, collab, chill, do all that cool stuff for free. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.